Hello everyone, my name is Audrey Gordon and I'm here to introduce you to a third tutorial template, and this tutorial template will help you in formatting HTML emails. So many of you are familiar with our current Create HTML table action. We've gotten rave reviews on the fact that that really makes it easy to create HTML tables and to send them in emails as a result for any table array in Power Automate. Although we have gotten some feedback that you'd like to make those HTML tables look a little better. Add some padding, give me a little bit of color, just a little bit more to make it that extra special professional look. And so we heard you. And what I've put together for you is a tutorial template that will show you how you can use Power Automate to generate the HTML needed for a very professional looking HTML table. Okay, so let's go to templates together and look how I find these. So as mentioned in other videos, you just type tutorials in the search. We'll be adding tutorials as we go along. There have already been videos released on these other two, and so this is the last one that I'll be creating a video for until we have some new ones out there. So this one says click a button for tutorial to send an email for reporting planner task. So basically this is focused on helping you build HTML. And so you may actually notice the HTML in the title later on as we revise our tutorial templates based on your feedback. You notice that it automatically signs me into Planner. The reason we chose Planner in this case was because we know everybody in Office 365 has access to Planner. And so we wanted to give you a template that you could open no matter who you are if you have an Office 365 account, and you could replace the connection if you want to. And that's why Planner was the choice that we made. So I'm just going to click continue, and then I'm going to give it a new name, and I'm just going to call this HTML to Planner. I should say it the other way around. Planner to HTML. All right. Again, this is Planner, but you can replace it, and I'll talk about that. So the first thing I'm going to do is close everything just by hitting on those banners so I can kind of summarize the outline of this flow. It starts with a manual button, and the reason being we want to make it easy for you to play with this, just kind of generate it anytime you want, just to try new things and experiment. I suggest you have it go to you. So one thing down here on the bottom, if you want to just make sure that the person who clicks the button gets the email, in the very last email action, hit these two little advanced mode options. If you want to pick something, pick the user email from the button. This way, as you play with this, it'll always be you that gets the email until you're ready to use it for somebody else. You'll be testing it in your own email. Now notice when I try to save, the flow checker lets me know what I'm missing. So there's a few things I'm missing, so let's go check them out. I need to specify which plan. So I'm going to choose planning team site. I happen to have a plan with the same name as the group. You might not, and that's okay. If you want to see all the plans under your group, just hit the X as I did and then drop this down. That way you can just pick the plans. So the important thing here to make it easy to select the right plans is to first select the right group, and then you'll get the list of plans. All right. Another thing Flow Checker was telling me about is I have a little convert time zone in here. This is because the created time in the task, it's very long-winded, and so I wanted a simple format. So convert time zone is one of our date time actions, and I'm just going to hit all these X's as I go down, and that will give me drop downs. So I want the short date pattern, so I'm looking for the shortest amount of space for my HTML table, so that is the minimum date I could have. And then I know for a fact that usually my date and times come in UTC format, and I'm going to also convert them to Pacific time. All right, this way the date and time for the created date. This is from the apply to each, is looking at this value, which is coming from this list tax action. I know I've formatted that create date to the shortest possible denominator for my HTML table. Okay, and so now you'll see the flow checker won't complain anymore because I've given it the minimum viable product for what it will produce for us, right? It has all of its needs. But I need to go over this with you because unless you're going to use Planner, and even if you do, you may want to revise this flow. So this flow automatically works right out of the box. Let's just do a quick test so you can see what it looks like in my email. So all I did was kind of fill in all the parameters, and now I'm running a test. But this is assuming that I don't need to change anything. Like, I love using Planner, and that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to change it. I like the headers that Audrey chose, that kind of thing. With that assumption made, this is literally a 3-click scenario, which ends up with an email that looks like this. Now, FYI, this table is going to change width based on how they're looking at this, which is because the table width is set at 100. So I'll show you that. So you'd want to keep it at 100% so that it adjusts to whatever they're looking at. All right. And then we'll also talk about this little footnote here. All right. My Outlook is in dark mode, but this would work just as well if I were not in dark mode. The difference being that the dark mode kind of mutes the gray. In a light Outlook format, that second row looks more gray. So let me show you that in the deck. Here's an example on the bottom of this screen of the HTML and how it looks on a light Outlook surface, that the rows of the table itself look light gray. And so we're going to look at this up close in the flow. I just wanted you to see how easy it is to do if you want to keep using Planner. But you may not want to keep using Planner, or you might want to change the columns that I chose to show here. So let's go step by step. First, we have our get item. So this could be list tasks from planners, but it could also be get items from SharePoint. It could also be list records in CDS. It could be any of those things that are get methods that return a table array. And if you don't like using Planner, you would just delete this and replace it with the appropriate action. Now, the only thing I will point out is that the action for Planner requires 2 different actions, very similar to Microsoft Forms. Microsoft Forms, in its first GET request, does not give you the details of what they submit in the form. You have to actually add another action that says GET response details. Same thing with Planner. You get most of the fields when you list tasks, but the field you don't get is description and some of the task details. So you'll see I'll also have a place coming up soon here where I'm going to show you where I get details. And the only reason I'm getting details for these tasks is because I want the full description of the tasks in the email as well. But not every data source is going to make you have to add that second action. A lot of them will give you all the data in your first GET request. And so in that case, you would get rid of the second action for getting details in this template. All right. But it's important that at this point in the flow, like after the button, somewhere up there is where you decide what you're getting and where you're getting it from. And then you can replace this action with a new one. Okay. Now I'm going to go to this. This is like the hero of this template. It is a variable. The variable is variable in the flow as well. So it starts out with some static data that I'm going to go over with you, but then it's updated in the apply to each, and also in the in after the apply to each, so that that variable ends up holding the HTML table. And so all the formatting for the table, all the records will be held in that variable. Okay, so when you look at this table here, recognize that this whole table, not this footer, but the table, and not that header, but the table, is all found in that variable. So keep that in mind. So let's look at this variable to see how it starts. So it starts out, the name of the variable is HTML table, conveniently enough. And the format is a string. Some people would expect it to be an array, but it's a string because it has to hold a lot of stuff, which is like the typical HTML stuff you would use if you were going to put this in a email or in a website. You'd need all these tags. And the first thing we give you is a style sheet. We actually give you a custom style sheet that you're embedding right in this variable right here. So you see the end style, begin style, that's all CSS. And here's what I'll say to you. If you've never played with CSS before, you might want to leave this section alone, because it is possible, if you're unfamiliar with this style sheeting, that you could break the style sheet. And so be careful. However, if you know HTML and you know CSS, have at it, because you can change this, right? Let me show you some things you might want to change. So the border, it's 1 point thick. Maybe you want it thicker. What's the color of this table? If I highlight this hex and I just go to a browser and choose hex color picker or something like that, it will take me to where I can paste that in and see what that color is. And you can see that that's the color. Why do I keep closing it? In the background right here. Okay, so if you wanted to make that a different color, you could pick a different hex code. Make sense? All right, so I'm gonna just minimize that. Go back to my hex code. So then there's another one here, which is the background color. And if I paste that in there, you'll see that that's this light gray right here. Right here. Okay? That's why all the rows are that light gray. All right? So if you wanted to change that, you could change those colors. I don't suggest you change the width, because that width being 100% means that whatever they're looking at it in, whether they're looking in their phone or they're looking on their desktop or they're looking on the hallway hub, whatever they're looking at, it will fit that space. And so I probably wouldn't suggest you go beyond the thickness of the borders, the colors, and maybe at the most the font sizes. Pay attention. So headers are different than rows, and so look for the header tags so that you know what you're editing. But again, if you have no experience with CSS, my suggestion to you is don't touch anything all the way up to this style. Okay? If you know CSS, have fun. You can add more padding, you can change font size, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So, however, this section you do have to change. These represent your table header. So let me go back to my deck so you can see this nice and big. This section up here, sorry, I didn't mean to go to the next slide. This section up here is that bottom piece of that variable. So when you open the flow, this will be at the bottom of the variable. And you can see that I've highlighted in blue the actual column names. And you can map them from here down to the HTML table that results from this. So if you want to change your header titles, you would change what I've highlighted in blue here. But you also have to remember that they are surrounded by open and closing header tags. So as long as you're not subtracting columns or adding columns, you can just replace the text. But if you want one more column than I have, or one or two less columns than I have, then you have to make some deletions. So let me just zoom in here and show you. I can change this word description to details. But if I don't want the description column at all, I have to also remove the open and closing tags around it. Okay. Now, if I want to add a column in front of this, I would also copy the open and closing tags. So I just did a Control C. Now I'm going to click here, being careful to be between these two, and paste. So now I've literally added a column to my table. Okay, just remember, if you're deleting a column, make sure you take the header, the open and closing table header tags with you, and make sure you don't mess up anything around it. So don't make a mistake and delete this left. So you might make a mistake, but double, triple check before you leave this action that you have every column wrapped in a TH and an open TH and a closing TH table header tag. Be careful not to delete the table rows either. So here we have table row open and table row close. So basically this is the single header row. And then you actually have the table header tags that says this is the header row. So that's these two. So don't mess with those. Basically edit the words and or delete columns by taking out that whole block, or by copying that block and adding another where you want it. Just check that you don't remove the wrong things. All right. This includes your open table and your table body tags. All right. Okay. So basically after you fix your headers, you're good. I just want to see if I want to remember to tell you anything else. The only thing I didn't mention is that the table class equals flow table. This is important for your CSS. In the CSS above, so if I go back up to the header, excuse me, sometimes my screen pops when I'm zoomed. If I go up to the top here, you'll see that this style only applies to a table called flow table. And that's why it's important that we leave that flow table name there. If we decide to change it, we'd have to change it up here too, so that we keep that style. Okay, so that's the end of that story. And it's super easy to do. Next, we have an apply to each. Now, what the goal of this apply to each is this append down here. So I'm going to just start at the bottom and go up and explain why the rest of it exists. What we're doing with this append is we're taking every row of our data. So we're iterating through the items that we got with the get method. And we are adding that record to the HTML table string so that our records are wrapped in the HTML tags. Okay, so it's important that this represents a single row in your table. So this piece down here, if we go back to the deck for a minute, represents every row that will appear under the table header. Okay, and so it's important that this apply to each takes all the tags that we need, but wrapped around the HTML. And it's followed by the closing tags after it finishes adding that row. All the rows. All right, so let's go back to Flow and talk a little bit about making sure you have the right number of columns. So remember, we set up our columns up here so that we had, and if we count our table header tags, we can see how many columns we have. We have 1, I'm going to skip the closing, 2, skip the closing, 3, skip the closing, 4, skip the closing, 5. So there are 5 columns. This means that in my append to string, I need to make sure that there are still 5 columns. And so if I count my dynamic tokens, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're good. So you want to double check that you have the same amount of columns that you have dynamic content, so that you don't have a header with 4 columns and a table with 5 or a table with 3. So you want to double check that. And you can also, in this case, instead of like a header tag, you have a cell tag, which is TD. So this is the open cell tag, close cell tag, and this one has in it a hyperlink to the actual task. And so you can see how I've formatted that there. But then that's the end of that first column. And then the second column is using a converted time. The third one is using the title. The fourth one's using the description. And the fifth one's using the percent complete. Now, in Planner, you don't get the description in your first GET request. It's very similar to forms in that it doesn't give you everything. So I had to add a GET task details before here so that I could get the description from the details. That's not the case with every data source. It just depends on whether or not the API has an extra action for getting more details about the item that was gotten. And then I didn't want to put the created time from Planner here because it's long and it has a Z and a T and stuff like that. So I wanted my my date to just look very simple, very short. So I used the convert time zone action, which I adore. It's one of our date time actions. And then I put the created time from Planner there. This is the created date time. And then wonderful thing, I can choose from any of these date time formats. And of course, I want the shortest one to fit in my HTML table. And it came from UTC and I put it to Pacific. So I really like that convert time zone action, and therefore I used it here instead of using the raw created time from Planner. And then finally, after it iterates through all of those, this HTML variable has the header row, all the records underneath, but it hasn't closed the table tags. And so after they apply to each, we're going to open up this one, and this is another append variable that's appending the closed table body, closed table tags, so that we have the whole thing now in that variable. The header, the records, and then the closing tags. So now when we get ready to send our email, right, we can just use this HTML table. You see that it's inserted right here. So basically, if you click in there and look at your dynamic content, you'll see that that HTML table is there. That's what you need right here to give you that HTML table. Now, this is a work of art that I give, I just think, so the genius behind a lot of what I know is either David Blythe or Steven, and I have to give credit to David Blythe for this one, because this is genius. Have you ever passed out a flow or had a flow email, and then 6 months later somebody asks you to change that flow? Maybe you're sending out weekly notifications to people on pending items, and then somebody says, hey, change that flow because we want this new column, or we want to take away that old column, or whatever they want new. And you, for the life of you, cannot find your flow. You don't remember what environment you put it in. You don't remember where it is. It's out of your head, right? And maybe it was even a team flow, but you don't even remember who you shared it with, right? This is genius right here. This is a HTML hyperlink to the details page. I love, love, love this. I think this is a best practice we all should do in everything, because we'll never lose flows again, right? So basically, he just put some text. It says powered by Power Automate, but that could say whatever you want it to say. And then after that, he puts the URL of the environment and he concatenates that with the workflow display name, so that you end up with a clickable link to the flow details page. So if somebody says, I need you to update this email, all you have to do is click on that link and it will bring you exactly to the flow details page. I want to tell you that that is basically my favorite thing in this particular tutorial, and I think it should be a best practice. I think that we should do it everywhere, just so that our human memories don't have to um, jump through hoops to remember where our flows are. All right, so I hope that was helpful to you. This is a really nice tutorial template for learning how you can wrap tags around records. I'm thinking of a lot of opportunities to use the same system for other things where you want to build some complete string that might be HTML, that might be XML, that may be whatever it is that you want to build. And then you can use a variable like this to iterate through the items and add the tags that you need. Really loved this experience. I hope you do too. We are going to be adding other tutorial templates based on your feedback. So please do add your feedback to the Power Automate community. If you have ideas on new tutorial templates, go ahead and add that to the ideas forum and be sure to tag it with a label of tutorial templates so we don't miss it. Thank you for coming to this video, and I hope you'll be coming back again soon. Please do enjoy your Power Platform experience.